Night Shift Whispers.
My wristwatch displayed 9 o'clock in the evening as the interprovincial bus I was boarding commenced its departure from the terminal. I was set to visit my aunt, who resided in a different province. This journey was going to be an overnight affair, so I deliberately refrained from sleeping before departure, with the intention of being able to rest during the journey. Furthermore, there was not much of interest to be enjoyed along the way. 90% of the toll road was flanked by trees on either side, which, of course, appeared as indistinct clumps in the darkness of the night. My seat number was adjacent to that of a woman in her 30s who appeared different from the average person. She didn't exude a modern vibe, yet there was an inexplicable allure about her. There was a unique charisma emanating from her appearance that made her more than just elegant. In a word, she was captivating in a distinct way. Her beauty seemed almost mystical, or something of the sort. I felt as though I had formed my own conclusions about her, but I didn't feel the need to delve deeper or seek validation of her uniqueness. One thing was clear: her porcelain-like skin seemed as though it would be cool to the touch, though I didn't try and had no intention to touch it. She smiled at me as I took my seat beside her. Her smile was extraordinary, but once again, I struggled to describe it. We engaged in small talk for a moment, inquiring about our destinations. When I mentioned my stop, she hinted that I might arrive there late, without specifying why. She only mentioned that she would disembark at the provincial boundary, so she would be getting off earlier. Once again, the peculiar charisma within her made me refrain from asking further. Well, I didn't visit my aunt just once a year, whereas she probably had a routine of traveling long distances on this bus, so she likely knew the ins and outs of this route. Since I had intended to sleep from the start, and my body was exhausted after a full day of work, I excused myself from continuing the conversation with her. She nodded in agreement, and I soon drifted off to sleep. Somehow, my sleep was unusually deep for a bus, which was naturally not conducive to comfortable rest. In my slumber, I dreamt. In my dream, the bus was passing through a dense forest, and the trees were unlike any I typically saw in my daily life. These trees were extraordinarily massive, with irregular, winding trunks, branches, and bizarrely spiraling limbs. Their foliage was dense, radiating a deep, magical green glow. Perched on these peculiar branches and twigs were numerous small, light green birds and sparkling white butterflies. The road that cut through the forest was steep and winding, a never-ending ascent. After who knows how many kilometers, the bus finally arrived at a flat area where there was an unusual village. In general, the village resembled those from the past. The houses were constructed from wood and thatched with palm leaves, and the floors were made of an odd, slightly greenish stone arrangement. The streets were unpaved, entirely composed of gravel, yet neat and artistic. Men, women, old and young, children, everyone moved about in peculiar attire. Their clothing was uniformly light brown, in simple styles reminiscent of the past. Of course, there was no electricity in the village. Lighting was provided by simple lanterns fueled by resin from the local trees. The people in the village moved about with serene and joyful expressions. Not a single one seemed sad or angry. They greeted each other and smiled. But when I tried to greet and smile at them, none of them acknowledged my presence. Not a single one. It was as if I were an invisible being to them. Not knowing where to go, I ventured further into the village. In the center of the village, there was an open field surrounded by a row of peculiar, fairy tale-like flowers. In the midst of the field, a group of dancers and traditional musicians had gathered with their wooden instruments. Suddenly, one of them, who appeared to be an elder or perhaps the tribal leader, because everyone showed great respect to him, looked at me with an intense gaze. Out of nowhere, he drew a machete from his belt and brandished it in my direction, his eyes burning with anger. I froze and slowly stepped back. The man seemed to command his fellow villagers to pursue me. Panic-stricken, I immediately turned and ran as fast as I could. I could hear them suddenly sounding like a crowd of thousands, chasing me with thunderous voices. Gasping for breath, I woke up. I could hear a commotion around me, like the bustling of a large crowd, as if there were thousands of people outside the bus. How far had I gone? Was there really a city this crowded at night? As far as I knew, the interprovincial bus route always stuck to the toll road and never ventured into a city. I still couldn't understand why the atmosphere was so chaotic, but sleepiness overcame my curiosity, making the decision for me not to inquire further. I fell asleep again, for who knows how long. But strangely, the dream repeated itself exactly. The second time, I woke up to the same tumultuous noise. This time, however, the surroundings were already bright. Was it morning already? The woman next to me advised that I shouldn't sleep anymore. It was morning, and I mustn't be caught off guard when passing through this village, she said. Fine. But what kind of village was this that I couldn't afford to be inattentive? With sleepy eyes and a throbbing head, I tried to look out the window. At first, it was blurry, but it gradually became clear. A village, not unfamiliar, was on the left side of the road. I was shocked. My goodness! It was the same village I saw in my dream. How was this possible? Had I truly awakened? Or was this just another layer of my dream? I glanced around. The people around me seemed calm, except for the bus driver. Yes, it seemed only the driver had realized that the bus he was driving had gone astray onto an unusual path. The bus came to a stop at an intersection right in front of the village. The woman next to me got up to leave. With a tense feeling, I watched her back as she walked towards the bus door. Before exiting, she turned and flashed me a smile. Suddenly, the entire bus erupted. Passengers were questioning where we were now. It seemed like they had just realized that the bus had gone off course into a strange place. They all rushed to get off, leaving me alone inside the bus. I hesitated for a moment. Should I get off the bus? But in my 2 previous dreams, the villagers had chased me with machetes in hand. What if the same thing happened again in this layer of the dream? Because I doubted if I had truly awakened at this point. Unable to decide what to do next, suddenly the clamor that had sounded like thousands of people became very clear, approaching the bus. I was shocked. My God! A group of people brandishing machetes were clamoring to board the bus. My heart raced, seemingly ready to leap out of my chest. I had trouble catching my breath. Fear, panic, shock, confusion, and a million other indescribable feelings swirled around me. One thought loomed large in my mind: my life was about to come to an end. I closed my eyes, braced myself, and prepared for the worst. I was convinced that I would meet my demise here, whether swiftly and painlessly or through a dramatic, convoluted, and excruciatingly painful ordeal. But suddenly, a clear, charismatic, and gentle voice cut through the tumult. Its tone was polite yet firm. "Release this girl. She's not the one. She just happens to have a face resembling that woman." I truly didn't understand who they were referring to, how similar the woman's face was to mine, or why she was being pursued, but I was too terrified to find out. I cowered in my passenger seat, trembling in fear and breaking out in a cold sweat. I didn't pay exact attention to how the rest of the event played out. What's certain is that a few minutes later, the bus was quiet and the machete-wielding people were gone. The woman had saved me. Suddenly, the bus conductor shouted from the bus's threshold, "Miss, please get off. The bus is being evacuated." Huh? Evacuation? Why? I was utterly confused, but when I disembarked from the bus, a much greater confusion awaited me. There were no more machete-wielding people, no more strange village, no more glowing green trees, unique birds, or butterflies. All that remained was an ordinary, dense forest with a mix of wild, heterogeneous trees and underbrush, and the bewildered bus passengers. Yes, of course, we were all baffled. How had our bus suddenly ended up in a thick forest with no apparent road access and no tire tracks to indicate that the bus had skidded normally? Luckily, the nearest village was reachable within a 15-minute walk, so evacuation help could be arranged promptly. The villagers seemed unfazed. They said that the phenomenon of vehicles transporting passengers to a mysterious village and ending up here happened occasionally every 3 or 4 months. My goodness, why did I have to coincidentally experience one of these rare and strange events? Out of millions of other journeys and passengers, geez. Feeling physically and mentally exhausted, I made my way to a clearing amidst the trees and intended to rest there while awaiting the next solution from the transportation company. My gaze inadvertently caught something up ahead. The charismatic woman who had sat next to me earlier was confidently stepping into the forest. She kept walking without looking back, then disappeared into the dense forest. Suddenly, I remembered her words at the beginning of our encounter. She had mentioned that I would be late to my destination. Could this be what she meant? I casually inquired with the bus conductor about the woman. The conductor said that I had been sitting alone since we departed from the starting city. The seat next to me had been reserved and paid for, but the person who booked it never showed up before the departure time. What? So, I was the only one who saw and interacted with her? And the most important question, was that woman a ghostly passenger?